Last year, I strived to go into my backlog and finally cover the BloodRayne franchise that I'd had on my Switch for quite a while. This year, I'm doing the same, but for Capcom's stylish action game featuring a white-haired demon killer with a sword and guns. By the way, did you know that the original Devil May Cry was initially a build for Resident Evil 4 that got scrapped for venturing too far away from the core formula? It's crazy that this right here was almost this right here. But enough of the history lesson. Let's dive into the trilogy, starting with the original. Here is my review of Devil May Cry for the Nintendo Switch. When it comes to story, the Lord of the Underworld had their powers sealed away by the great warrior Sparda, keeping them from invading the human realm. In modern day, his son Dante is attacked in his shop by a woman named Trish and recruited to stop that same evil lord from regaining his power and resuming his invasion. Now, when it comes to story, the plot is pretty cool, but we just don't get enough of it. The scenes are all basic, vague, and quick, showcasing, yes, Dante is the son of Sparda and the like. There are some pretty cool moments, especially the pseudo title drop near the end, but you just don't get very much from the characters. If I didn't already love Dante, Trish, and the others from other franchise games or Trish's entry in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, I probably wouldn't feel especially attached to them just from this original game. When it comes to gameplay, this is an action-adventure game with platforming and puzzle elements. As you trek through it, you'll be platforming around a big 3D area, solving puzzles with items, and fighting off demonic entities with your swords and lots of firearms. Now, first of all, this is based on the HD collection port of Devil May Cry 1 and not the PS2 original. That means we have an updated control style to mimic the combat of the later games, but unfortunately the technical glitches of the HD version are still here, which we'll touch on later. Now with game progression, DMC1 is a bit weird. In Resident Evil fashion, you have a large set of buildings and areas you explore from mission to mission, moving on to new areas and returning to older ones later on. But it's also segmented into missions where clearing an objective will put you on a result screen, letting you spend orbs to upgrade and save your progress before going into the next mission. What I find weird is the developers specifically wanted a mission-based system and not an open-ended mechanic like in Resident Evil. But when you go to the next mission, you're exactly where you left off and can, for the most part, go back and forth between older areas at your leisure. It feels exactly like a Resident Evil title, but with mission complete screens interrupting each chapter ending. Granted, there are a few times that the game actually blocks areas off, but you do have a fair amount of exploration capability. Now let's talk about what you do. Despite the series being known for its crazy over-the-top action, the original Devil May Cry is much more a puzzle game. The vast majority of missions will have you getting an item needed to open a door. True, you will have to fight enemies and bosses on the way there, but there are a bunch of missions that are literally just take this key item to this door or press this switch and escape the ship. It's very different than what I expected. But the combat is definitely where the fun is. Dante gets different melee and firearm weapons to equip as you go through the game. You get a sword, gauntlets, a shotgun, grenade launcher, and the list goes on. The game is set up in a combo-oriented system as well. Do directional inputs with his sword and you get different types of attacks, from a simple 3-hit combo to lunging enemies, air launching them, and a bunch of really neat looking stuff. It's actually pretty fun to combine all of these things together, like using a grenade launcher to stun a large enemy and then pummel them with a long sword combo. However, exploration and combat is also where this game will feel really dated and aged. This was originally a concept for Resident Evil 4, and you can definitely tell. While the camera does move cinematically, we have fixed camera angles, holding down a button before firing off bullets, all the puzzle elements, the backtracking, even the way Dante fires off the grenade launcher feels spot on how the animation and delay feels when using a heavy weapon in the older Resident Evil titles. And unfortunately, this makes the game feel very clunky. The fixed camera angles will often make it hard to see bosses when you're fighting them. The jumping mechanic is very precise with movement. There's no dash or dodge outside of just jumping straight up, and it all around just feels awkward. Devil May Cry is a difficult game by default, considering how much damage you take in learning enemy movements, and the clunky controls definitely add to that. But thankfully, easy mode and the orb system can definitely help you. When you down enemies, you gain red orbs that can be used as currency, letting you buy upgrades for your different weapons or special items that you can use in battle that are all very, very overpowered. From little things like replenishing the health or the devil trigger gauge, where you can temporarily boost your abilities, to having holy water that will literally just take out half of a boss's health bar if you're on easy mode. It may be a difficult game, but there's a lot to help you. And that brings us to content and length. Devil May Cry isn't super long with what kind of game it is. You can clear it in about 6 to 8 hours your first try, and then you gain access to New Game Plus to replay it in hard mode, or simply going back to your save files and looking around for the secret missions littered around different points of the story. For a $10 game, that's not bad at all. Next up is presentation. This game looks alright for what it is. The first game doesn't really have any super high visual enhancements, and then again the HD version of this on other platforms didn't either. The models do look smoothed out and the environments do look pretty good. It's mostly in cutscenes where the character models really look off. But to make up for this, performance is wonderful. Now we do still have the audio looping and animation glitches that plague the other HD versions of this game, but when it comes to frame rate, Capcom did good. We get a solid 60 frames per second from start to finish. I went through all missions and never saw it dip down. And that'll bring us to battery life. The original model gets 3 to 4 hours, the Lite gets 3.5 to 4.5, we get 6 to 7 on the V2, and 6.5 to 8 on the OLED. Now, in conclusion, Dante's original trilogy is available on the go, and that first title comes with pretty good optimization. Now on the downside, many mechanics of the game are pretty clunky and dated, the story is a bit too condensed for people to really start loving these characters, and the small glitches of the HD version persist here as well. But if you can get past the aged combat, it runs at a silky smooth 60 FPS and is a pretty good action game that started a genre back on the PS2. Reviews to Go rates Devil May Cry for the Nintendo Switch a 7 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.